Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Tim again, and I welcome you to the second section of the tutorial. And this section tackles the building of the first app. So before we go into building a full-blown app, let's tackle the boilerplate that was created by Flutter. Remember, from the first section, we did the Flutter create command in the command line, and it made some files. And so we haven't seen what each file does, so let's get into it now. So let's play with the boilerplate codes. When a new Flutter app is created, it comes with a set of boilerplate codes that allows you to play and get a feel of what Flutter is. It makes an app with a text widget and a button that increments the count inside a state that is linked to the text widget's content. We'll tackle what state is later on. So further, the boilerplate also comes with codes for Android and iOS devices so that you can run them in both platforms. So let's take a look at the boilerplate codes. Okay, so here's the list of the folders. So you have the Android folder, you have the build folder, you have your fonts folder, iOS folder, the lib folder, and the test folder. Okay, so the main file that we need to edit when doing a Flutter app is the main.dart file. So this is the first file that Flutter looks for when it compiles your code. So let's see this one. It says here import the material plugin. This is a package that is included in Flutter. So it's responsible for the UI for the material app. And then there comes this void that returns run app, a new my app widget. Okay, so with Visual Studio, you can press Ctrl or Alt depending on your setting. But for me, it's Alt and then right click on the highlighted function, and it will lead you to where that function is so that you are sure that it refers to the correct function. Okay, so my app is a stateless widget. Okay, so it contains this override of the build function for a widget. Okay, we will tackle what a widget is later on. So, but now let's look at the codes first. So it returns a new material app. So this means that it returns a widget. It should be a widget. So this is the type that it should return. And material app is a widget. Okay, you can see a full list in Flutter.io's website. So returning back to material app, it's got a title, and this is what you will see on the app itself. So theme, in Google's specs, there's a theme that follows material theming. Okay, so you have your primary swatches, primary colors, background colors, card color, light or dark. So you will learn more of that later on, but this is not to tackle the theme part. However, it just includes primary swatch, which is blue. Okay, so then you have the home here, which is the widget that will be shown. Okay, so it refers to another widget. Okay, and since in your codes you would want to be clean and concise so that you don't clutter your development, what you can do is make a new class for this, so you don't have to put all the codes here in this section. So you can also put this into a different file so it will be cleaner. So let's go to the my home page, okay, which is this one. And if you notice, this one is a stateful widget. Okay, the other one is stateless. So more on the difference later on. Okay, and again, there's another class here that extends my home page, which is this one. What it does is that this one is like your entry point to the real thing. Okay, so this one just extends this class. So everything in this class is reachable in this other class, the my homepage state class. And this is where all the states or the variables are found, the reactive variables. So in a stateless widget, you can also have variables, but your app or UI would not react to them. Okay, so here there's a variable called counter, and it put an initial value of 0. Okay, so then there's this void that is called increment counter, and you see this statement here, set state, that increments the counter. So you cannot just, let's remove this for a while. You cannot just do this on its own. Okay, it's a little bit slow. However, without the set state command, the value in the counter variable will not change reactively, although it will change somehow, but the widget that relies on the value, let's say, let's scroll down here for a while, this value here would not increment if you don't use the set state command or function or statement, however you want to call it. Okay, and so that's the importance of set state, and basically that's the main difference of stateless widgets and stateful widgets. Okay, so here we can see the build function of the class. So when the class is called, it will return this build function. So it returns a scaffold. This is another type of widget that has the app bar, the bars on top of the app, and then the body, which is in the center of the app, and then a float-in action button. So for Android developers, this is pretty much a standard somehow from the material standards or specifications. So the body here requires a widget. So it needs a new widget. So this is a center widget. What the center widget does is that it just puts its child, this child, to the center, horizontally and vertically. And the column widget here is a widget that stacks its children vertically. So there's this counterpart called the row widget, and it stacks its children horizontally. So the app bar has a title parameter, and you can see here that it returned another widget called text. And if you hover over the text function or statement or widget, there is this string data. If it's outside of the curly braces, it means that it is required and you don't need to specify the parameter name. So you can see here, there are other parameters that are inside the curly braces, and you can add them just like this. So remember, the widget, the title is the string data here. So the next one, let's just put, let's say, overflow. So since the overflow is inside the curly braces, it's inside here, you need to call overflow. Okay, and then give its setting or parameter or whatever that it needs. Okay, so you have choices here. Let's say it's an ellipsis. Okay, so whenever the text overflows the container, it will become, or it will have an ellipsis at the end. So you have other parameters here, and if you want to know the type of parameter, just hover over it and a pop-up will usually come up, and you can see the meaning or what is the required type here. Let's say here it's a text overflow type, so you cannot just put other type here, a string or a number. Okay, so it needs a certain type so that it will be correct. Okay, so I hope that clears that up. We will learn more about this later on. So for example, the body parameter of the scaffold. Okay, so the scaffold has this body parameter. There it is. Okay, so it's inside the curly braces, so that's why we needed to call the body parameter specifically. So if you hover over the body, it will say the primary content of the scaffold. So it accepts a child or a widget, and then the center widget here accepts a child that is supposed to be another widget. Okay, so you can put as many widgets as you want, as long as as you really need them. Because remember that if you add more widgets, it will affect the memory handling or even the performance of your app. And you need to make sure that you understand your app's flow. Let's say whether you need a row, a column, or a center, or a divider, a button, a text field, a slider, a switch. There's a lot of other widgets out there. And we will learn maybe a few of them while we go along the app or the tutorial. So the column widget here requires a main axis alignment. So how the children are aligned through the main axis, which is the vertical axis, because you can put the children centered vertically, or whether they will start on the top or the bottom. So you see here that there is this main axis alignment dot start, and this is the default if you don't specify one. For example, if I remove this, it will default to the start, main axis alignment dot start. So your widgets will be all in the top or they will start on the top and they will propagate to the how many they are. Okay, so let's put that back and let me show you. There's this another parameter for the column widget called cross axis alignment. What this means is the alignment on the cross or against the main axis, which is vertical. So this means the alignment horizontally of the children. So again, you can make it on the center from the start. That means for left to right locales or languages, it will start from the left. Or for right to left languages or locales, it will start from the right. So the widgets will be pushed to either side, or even you can put it on the center and or make it stretch to fill the cross axis. So we will be using that later on when we create the chat app. So it requires children. That means it requires a list. Here it says that it needs a list denoted by the greater than and the less than characters or symbols. And inside here is the type that it requires. So it's a list of widgets. So the list of widgets, of course, needs an array of widgets. So just put the widgets here, and it will add them to the list. So here we see that there's this text widget that is just saying you have pushed the button this many times, and then another text widget that will appear below the first widget, and it just contains the counter variable. And this counter variable is right over here. And since this counter variable or state equates to 0 in runtime, the first thing that you'll see here is 0. So when you increment the counter, this text will automatically and reactively change according to the value of the state. Okay, so float in action button. So this is a type of button, but it's specifically made as a float in action button, the circle button. So there's this onPressed parameter, which is a void or a function that is called when you tap on the button. Okay, so when it's tapped or pressed, it will call this function, and we will see it here. Okay, so this is the set state function that will just add 1 to the counter every time it is called. Okay, so tooltip increment. So when you long press on the button, it will show increment word. And then there's a child, which is an icon, the plus or heart or whatever button icon that is required for your app. So you can change this. There's a lot of other icons. So let's say cancel. Okay, you can just put any icon here that you want or your UI needs. So let's put that back to the ad. Okay, so the icon widget has other parameters like the size, so you can change the size, the color, a semantic label, which is very much needed for accessibility, for visually impaired, things like that. And then you have the text direction, which is either left to right or right to left. And then the color here will just change the color of the icon itself. So it's inside the icon, so it will just change itself. However, for the floating action button, you can also change the background color which will change the floating action button color, and you can also change the foreground color. So if you don't specify a color for the child here, the floating action button will change the color of its children or its child accordingly to this foreground color. So let's go back to the slides. So the codes for Android and iOS devices are also included. Let me show you that. So here, let's not save this one. Android folder has all the boilerplate codes for Android. The build, the Gradle folder, the app folder, the source, the resources, drawables, meet maps, okay, and iOS too, okay. However, it's kind of a little bit different because it includes the Flutter folder, which means that this is where Flutter connects to iOS apps, okay. So the runner, you'll see everything here, info list, okay. So everything is there. So when you run or when you use your emulator or your actual devices, you can already run the codes without doing anything else. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. Okay, so a boilerplate or a scaffold refers to code that can be used to start a project. So as you can see with the boilerplate that we just examined, is that there's an app already built. So it also provides a simple way for coders to learn, especially for beginner coders. So let's get back to Flutter. So what is a state? Like what I told you a while ago, state is like a variable. However, you need to use the set state to set its value, unlike, a regular variable. So if there's a change in the widget when the user interacts, it's basically stateful because the widgets react to the state of the variable or the widget too. So stateless widget has no internal state to manage. Even if you put variables inside it, the widget will not react. Okay, it will not change the text or the color or anything if it's a stateless widget. Okay, so again, let's see the difference. So this is stateless widget. This one didn't even put a variable. It just returns the build function and it returns the material app. So here we see the stateful widget. Okay, so this is where it may get vague. Okay, you see this is the stateful widget. Okay, and there's this variable, the final string variable called title. And then I keep on, telling that this is the stateful widget. Okay, so this one here, the main class, is like the door to the actual widget. So when you call this class, my homepage class, you would need to satisfy its constructor, which is this one. Okay, so you can see that the constructor is just like copying the main class name and then including all of the state inside it, like this string title. For example, let's put an integer, main integer. You will notice that the constructor here says that the final variable main integer must be initialized because this one doesn't contain state yet, and this is, like a parameter to it. So let's add it here, this dot main integer. Okay, so now the warning is gone, and then up here where it's called, you can now put main integer. So whatever you put here will be connected to this stateful widget, and then this state here can then refer to that variable or state. Okay, but the real state here is this one. This is something that you can change on the fly. Okay, I hope I delivered that clearly. However, we will see more of that later on and the differences that they have. So reactivity, as I explained, the widgets or the classes would react to the state when you put the setState function over here. So that's how reactivity is defined, is that it will just react when there's a change in the state. So now we're about to run the app. I will be running this in my own device, which you can see here. It's an Asus Android device. Or if you have an emulator, you can just run it and then it will be listed here. However, emulators don't work as fast on my laptop, so I'm using my own physical device. Okay, so now let's run the app. Let's go to the codes in VS Code. So let's just click the Start Debugging button here, and then it will load all the dependencies. Okay, so it will go through the usual Android build process, running Gradle and checking for errors, and even installing the dependencies that it needs so that it can run. So in the first run that you do this, it will take a little while because it compiles all those codes first, but then subsequent runs will be a little faster, especially the hot reload function when you have to change the code and save it, and it will automatically pop up into your app while debugging. And it's really fast, like sub-second, as they say. Okay, and by the power of the fast forward process, it's now installing the APK to the device, and you will soon see the output. Alright, there it goes. So first, after installing, it will sync the files to the device. This only happens during debug, not on the release process. So it's like it builds a bridge between the editor and your device so that the files can be synced. So now we got the app here running. Never mind the debug graphic on the top right. It will be gone when it's released. Okay. So now we have the title bar that says Flutter Demo Homepage, and then you have the text here that says you have pushed the button this many times, and then the number 0, and then the floating action button on the lower right. Okay, so let's just say we want to test hot reload. I'll go to the codes. I'll change the, let's say, the text here. You have tapped the button this many times. Save it. It will sync. And then immediately you will see the changes in the UI without stopping the debugging and then rerunning. So it automatically shows up. For most of the times, yes, it does automatically reload. However, in some more complex situations, you will need to stop debugging and then rerun. But it doesn't happen all the time. Okay, so let's click the button. As you see, the only thing that the button does is increment the counter, this counter state here. And you don't need to say a refresh or do a refresh, do a recalculation, do a reload. So it just increments the state, and then the widget here reacts rather quickly. So that's it for the reactivity. We will see more of that later on. So this is the end for this video.